Hello and welcome to this training module on configuring and managing a Microsoft Entra tenant. We will begin with the foundational concepts of a tenant and then dive deep into our main focus, using administrative units to delegate control and enforce least privilege access. Let's start by defining exactly what we are managing. When we talk about a Microsoft Entra tenant, we are referring to a dedicated instance of the directory service that your organization owns. Think of this as your digital building. As you can see in the first point, this container holds all your objects, users, groups, and applications. Critically, as noted in the second bullet, tenants are secure boundaries, just like a physical office. What happens inside one tenant is isolated from others to prevent data leakage. Moving to the third point, you will choose a configuration based on your audience. A workforce tenant allows collaboration between employees and business partners, while an external tenant is optimized for consumer apps. Finally, remember that the tenant forms the root scope for all your administration. Policies applied here affect the entire organization. This diagram visualizes the tenant structure within the Microsoft Cloud. At the top, we have the Microsoft Cloud hosting your specific Entra ID tenant. Following the flow down, you see the decision point for configuration type. You must decide the purpose of this instance. On the left path, we have the workforce tenant. This is the standard setup most IT admins interact with, housing your employees and internal business applications. On the right path, we have the external tenant. This path is distinct because it manages consumer identities for customer-facing apps, keeping them separate from your workforce data. Both types ultimately sit within the secure boundary of the tenant. Now that we have our tenant, how do we configure it? The first bullet highlights the global administrator. This is the highest level of privilege. The user who creates the tenant gets this role by default, but you should limit its use. Next, look at custom domains. Your tenant starts with an on Microsoft.com address, but for professional branding and user sign-in, you will want to verify your own domain like contoso.com. For the third point, we introduce RBAC. You should rarely use global admin. Instead, use specific roles like user administrator or billing administrator to perform tasks. This aligns with the principle of least privilege. Lastly, don't lock yourself out. As a best practice, always maintain 2 cloud-only emergency accounts that are excluded from policies like MFA, just in case you need emergency access. This flow outlines the initial setup actions for a new tenant. Starting on the left, once the tenant is created, the global admin role is automatically assigned. From there, we move into 3 critical configuration steps. First, up top, you verify your custom domain to establish your corporate identity. In the middle, you secure access by creating break glass accounts. At the bottom, you move away from using the global admin for daily tasks by assigning least privilege roles. You can see examples here like user admin or billing admin, which grant only the permissions necessary for those specific jobs. We are now focusing on our main topic, administrative units or O. As defined in the first bullet, an O is simply a container within your tenant. It holds specific resources like users and groups. Why use them? The second point explains the purpose, delegation. Without O, a user administrator can reset passwords for everyone in the company. With O, you can restrict that admin to only reset passwords for the School of Business or the European division. This brings us to use cases. As noted in point 3, this is perfect for large, distributed organizations where local IT needs autonomy. However, keep the constraint in point 4 in mind. You cannot put an O inside another O. The structure is flat, though a single user can belong to multiple units. This diagram clearly distinguishes between tenant-level and scoped administration. The large box represents your entire Microsoft Entra tenant. At the top, the global admin has control over everything. Inside the tenant, we have created 2 administrative units, the School of Business and the School of Engineering. Notice the scoped admin at the bottom. The solid line shows they have permission to manage the School of Business. However, the dotted line with the cross indicates they are blocked from managing the School of Engineering. This visualizes how it creates secure boundaries for delegation within the same directory. How do we build these units? Looking at the first bullet, you need the privileged role administrator role to create an O. You can do this in the portal or via code. Once created, you need members. Point 2 describes assigned membership. This is where you manually pick specific users or groups to be inside the unit. For automation, point 3 highlights dynamic membership. Just like dynamic groups, you can write rules. For example, if a user's department is sales, they are automatically added to the sales O. Be aware of the limitation in the final point. A dynamic O can contain users or devices, but you can't mix them in the same dynamic rule, nor can you dynamically add groups. This flowchart guides you through the population process. It starts with create O. You then reach a decision point, membership type. If you choose assigned, you follow the top path and manually select your resources. If you choose dynamic, you go down to define rules. Here, you must make another decision based on object type. You can create a rule for users, such as filtering by department, or for devices, such as filtering by OS. You cannot combine these in a single dynamic definition. Both paths ultimately lead to the result, an O populated with the correct resources ready for delegation. Now that our O is populated, we apply the permissions. The core concept in the first bullet is scoped assignment. Instead of making someone a generic help desk admin, we assign them that role only for this specific O. Point 2 lists supported roles. You can delegate tasks like password resets, group management, and license assignment. Crucially, as noted in point 3, these permissions are contained. User admin for the West Coast O cannot change global settings or users in the East Coast O. Finally, to do this, you navigate to the specific administrative unit in the portal and select roles and administrators to make the assignment. This diagram illustrates the delegation workflow. It begins with the privileged role admin selecting the target administrative unit. They navigate to the roles and administrators blade within that unit. They select a role, such as user admin, and assign it to a specific IT staff member. The result is scoped admin permissions. The solid arrow shows that this staff member can now manage O members. However, the dotted line emphasizes they are blocked from managing tenant settings, effectively locking their influence to just the container you created. For our advanced topic, we look at restricted management administrative units. As the first point explains, these are special containers where we flip the model. We block tenant-level admins from touching the members. Why? Look at point 2. You might have C-level executives whose passwords should never be reset by a general help desk admin. Putting them here protects them. Point 3 is critical. Even a global admin cannot modify these accounts by default. They would have to explicitly assign themselves permission, which leaves an audit trail. Finally, point 4 serves as a warning. You must enable restricted management when you create the O. You cannot toggle this setting on for an existing O. This diagram demonstrates the protective barrier of a restricted O. We have a restricted O shown in red, containing the CEO user account. On the left, notice that high-level roles like global admin and help desk admin have dotted lines marked blocked. They cannot touch the CEO account directly. The only allowed access comes from executive support on the right. This represents a specific administrator who has been explicitly assigned a scoped role over this restricted O. This ensures that only trusted individuals can manage your most sensitive identities. To wrap up, let's review the best practices for managing your tenant and administrative units. First, always apply least privilege, or the best tool to ensure admins only control what they need to. Second, rely on auditing. If you use restricted O or delegate access, check the audit logs to track who is assigning these roles. Third, check your licensing. While members can use free licenses, your scoped administrators will need a P1 license. Finally, have a strategy. Map your O to your actual organizational structure, whether that's by geography or department, to make management scalable and intuitive. This final diagram represents the continuous life cycle of good governance. Start at the top with strategy, mapping your O to your organization structure. Move clockwise to create O and then assign scoped roles to those units. This action achieves the state of enforced least privilege, highlighted in green. Finally, you monitor audit logs to ensure compliance, which feeds back into refining your strategy. This cycle ensures your tenant remains secure and manageable as your organization grows.